Welcome to the fifth episode of the Vandenberg Coalition's limited series podcast, China in the Homeland. I am your host, Thor Mortensen. In this series, we speak with guests about China's growing influence in the United States, how it affects everyday Americans, and what we can do to stop it. This is an all-hands-on-deck crisis, and we need state governments in on the most critical fight of our lifetime. From Pacific conflict stress tests to overseeing the rip and replace of Chinese manufactured components and critical infrastructure, governors and their cabinets serve as powerful voices of the American heartland. We will explore how these officers view their role in America's national security and work with others in their state to produce solutions to keep the united front out. Today, we are excited to be joined by Kenny Zoeller, the director of the Governor's Policy Research Office for Governor Jim Pillen of Nebraska. In that role, he serves as the chief policy advisor and advocate for Governor Pillen's agenda. Since he began this position in December 2022, the governor's team has worked to pass the largest tax cut in Nebraska's history, secured numerous social security conservative wins, and, most importantly for this podcast, has led the country in state action against foreign adversaries. Before assuming this job, Kenny served as Governor Pillen's campaign manager, had several roles in Governor Pete Ricketts's administration, worked as legislative aide within the Nebraska legislature, and served as the executive director of the Nebraska Republican Party. He holds a Master of Public Administration from the University of Nebraska, Omaha, and a Bachelor of Arts in History from Concordia University. So when he says go big red, he isn't just talking about the CCP. We're followers of the Vandenberg Coalition. Ann Lord wrote that joke.
I love it. Love it.
A true Cornhusker through and through.
Absolutely.
Kenny lives in Lincoln, Nebraska with his wife and son. To begin with, I'm going to go ahead and thank you for joining us today. I know you have a crazy legislative session going on right now, so we really appreciate you making the time to give insights about what successes you guys have had in Nebraska. The state has really been one of the premier leaders in this campaign against the CCP. So I want to talk a little bit about your background and also Governor Pillen's and ask how you came to understand the role states play in supporting the federal government's national security agenda, and in some cases where they fill the gaps where the federal government isn't acting. So how did you see China as posing a threat to Nebraska specifically?
Yeah, no. Well, Thor, thank you so much for having me on. And I'd like to thank the Vandenberg Coalition. The work that you guys are doing in helping states like Nebraska, and I know you guys help some of my colleagues across the country, is invaluable. Frankly, the topic of China is really one of the most important items that any governor across the country, any state legislature can be taking action for, because China is our true foreign adversary. And they are a threat to our daily lives and freedoms here in America. Governor Pillen, for your listeners that may not know, he came up and he grew up in agriculture, ended up starting a business, Pillen Family Farms, that ended up growing to be one of America's largest hog producers. And he also acquired and grew a company called DNA Genetics, which is one of the world's premier hog genetic companies. And in fact, 2 out of every 5 pieces of bacon in America is genetically influenced by the governor's company. And for those that know, a large market for pork is Asia, and frankly, a large portion of that is China. So very early on in the governor's professional career, his business career, he was enticed and asked to do business in China through a variety of different means, whether it be consulting or trying to gain market access. But constantly the governor said no. He viewed China back in the 80s and 90s, in early 2000s, as a communist entity, an area that really can't be trusted to do business in. And that was a tough thing to say no at the time, given the fact that there was a real push in America, but globally, to economically integrate with the CCP. So when the governor assumed office, when we won our election in 2022 and he came into office in 2023, he was primed, frankly, to take on the China question, and it was within his philosophical beliefs that we as a state government, need to be doing everything we can to combat this threat. And what he quickly learned, and what I quickly learned in this role, is frankly, states are almost the soft underbelly for Chinese influence. And there's a number of things that we can do in partnership, whether it be with the federal government or independently, that can really safeguard either our technology within the state, our critical infrastructure, or frankly, just even stop subsidizing Chinese companies. Which the governor's really been taking a lead on all of those items, and definitely excited to be talking about those in specific with you.
Awesome. I appreciate the personal element of the governor's story in identifying the China threat, though it does make me a little hungry for bacon, I have to say. Um, once you all identified that this was a threat and that states could play an important role in addressing it, I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you started developing a strategy for creating policy change to bolster not just Nebraska's defense, but one that could contribute to nationwide security.
Yeah, so another great question. First and foremost, we took a look at, are there areas that state taxpayer dollars are subsidizing the CCP? And the answer to that was yes. One of the items that we first took action on within our first legislative session was take the lead to stop subsidizing technology companies in the state of Nebraska that were using Huawei 5G technology. Believe it or not, through our universal services funds within the state, we were spending about $7 million, basically subsidizing those companies that were using a piece of technology that everyone knew as far back as 2016. Do not buy this. This is bad. And if you really want to have nightmares at night, just and I would encourage your listeners to take a look at some of the companies that were taking advantage of it. Look at the map of where these towers are located, and then overview some of our missile silos within the state of Nebraska or Wyoming or Colorado, and you'll start to notice that the Venn diagram of those two items are basically a circle. Um, so that was one of the first initial actions that we took because, one, it saves taxpayer funds. We shouldn't be promoting companies that are making the wrong decision by using technology that everyone has known is bad for Americans. And then two, would allow us to frankly utilize those dollars and spend on companies and incentivize companies that are making the right decisions for not using that. So that was really one of the first actions. And then the second thing, the governor, because of his status, has the opportunity to interact with, key individuals ranging from the FBI to the Department of Homeland Security, and working with them to figure out what are some state laws that we can do that may enhance their counterintelligence intelligence actions. And what we found is oftentimes what the CCP does, the investments that they decide to make, whether it's purchasing land or having assets on the ground, aren't necessarily illegal in all instances. They invest in something, they don't necessarily know what they're going to do with it, but as we know, the Chinese are taking 100 or 200 year viewpoint that maybe one day that asset could be useful. So in partnering with the federal government, one of the first things that quickly came up was, hey, please make sure that agricultural land or land within your states can't be held by foreign entities. So that was another bill that we partnered with them on. And thanks to the Trump administration and Secretary Rollins at the Department of Agriculture, with her announcement she made last July, we're able to coordinate with them using USDA data, frankly, to go after and make sure that individuals that are tied with the CCP or CCP land that is owned within our state, we're able to take action with them, with our Attorney General, with our U.S. Department of Agriculture, to get them divested. So, oftentimes what the federal government, in our experience, is looking for is a willing partner, and just giving them, frankly, options. It's not our role to be the lead in counterintelligence or fighting, but rather, we're here to provide tools for them to really take the actions.
So at the end there, you started listing a few of the concrete examples that Nebraska has executed really well and from state model. And so I'd like to take one initiative that you have all pursued called the Committee on Pacific Conflict, which was enacted back in 2024. So I want to use that as a case study to discuss how executives build coalitions and take action against the Chinese Communist Party. Can you talk about what the committee does and what its origins are?
Yeah. So, LB 1300 and the Pacific, stress test committee that we have here in the state of Nebraska, frankly, the origins of that go back to COVID-19. So, I had the opportunity to serve on then Governor Ricketts, now U.S. Senator Ricketts, his COVID-19 task force that he created early on February 2020. And this was before we knew what the disease was. So there's a lot of worst case scenarios being played out within the task force at that time. But one of the things that our hospitals and key industries were asking us to procure at the state level in 2020 was ventilators and then also N95 masks. And what we quickly found out is it didn't matter the amount of money that we had at the state or with these companies. Um, if you were partnering or if you were purchasing those items that happened to be manufactured on the soil of China, it was nearly impossible to get those items to America. So in a lot of ways, the reasons why we wanted to set up an LB 1300 Pacific Stress Test Committee is because we essentially, as a society, had a global stress test in 2020 where we saw that China was more than willing to shut down exports for their own uses and purposes. Or if you were lucky enough to get something that was manufactured from a non-Chinese company to America, and you started to do tests on N95 masks, you started to notice the test came back negative, and all of this product that you purchased was essentially worthless. So that was during a time of peace, right? It definitely global struggle and all of the items that we had to deal with during the pandemic. Now imagine if China decides to take action on Taiwan. Do we think we're actually going to be able to get key items, whether it be for our transmission lines within the state of Nebraska, or key items, for pipelines or things of that nature that are just absolutely critical, just for our daily lives, for turning the power on, or for making sure that we're able to have energy move within our states. And frankly, the answer is no, right? So what we wanted to do. With LB 1300, and what we're continuing to do is identify those specific products that may be within the supply chain, whether it be with our public power entities here in the state of Nebraska, or some of our municipal water sources within the state, and frankly identify those, and then try to get away from public procurement from those items. And this is frankly something that we are very proud of doing. That we've been able to identify a couple of items working with our political subdivisions to really get ahead of the curve. Because I mean, the answer isn't if China is going to take action on Taiwan. I think any expert you talk to on that specific topic is when. So I'm glad from a Nebraskan standpoint that we've identified those items and are starting to make sure that our critical infrastructure has other avenues to be provided for.
Yeah, you guys have taken really great steps and done excellent work in preparing for how Nebraska plays a role not just in America but in the world and is indeed affected by the world. So as you're doing that, uh, surely you've come up against some sort of pushback or challenge at some point, and I'd love to hear if you've experienced any of that, whether it be from, the CCP or just people in state who maybe find conflict with the initiative you're taking with their own interests.
Yeah, there's definitely some pushback from individuals who may think we're overstepping our role at the state, or thinking that we're trying to play national security with at the state level. But at the end of the day, whether you look at public polling on China, or If you take a look at what is the right thing to do, both in both instances, the public voters of both stripes, Republican and Democrat, want us to take China seriously. They want us, whether you're Republican or Democrat, to frankly decouple from China. Nebraskans, and I know Americans want us to bring manufacturing and bring it onshore for items that we're maybe developing in China, and first and foremost, bring it onshore to America, or work with an ally to have it onshore there. Um, the reality, a lot of the pushback, frankly, in my opinion, is just from individuals who don't necessarily know what the impact could be when China decides to disrupt the world order when it comes to invading Taiwan. Um, but at the end of the day, like, we will be proven right in the fact of, one, like, we need to take that seriously, and we should. And then two, as we're seeing, with the president currently in some of the actions that he's taken against our foreign adversaries, they're foreign adversaries, and they're foreign adversaries because they don't have our democratic values, right? It's just always glossed over that China is going through an ethnic cleansing phase right now, which is just it's unbelievable. We said after 1945, never again, but yet it's happening in the world's second largest economy. And then the other faction that may be pushing back against us is individuals that say, well, maybe we just got to coexist with China, so we need to have investments in there. Or, we need to maybe not decouple the state's retirement plans from certain Chinese investments. And, at the end of the day, China is not a smart investment. So whether you want to see it or not, whether, however you see it, it's just not a wise investment right now. So those are pretty much the two entities. But like I said, the public, the voters value us being tough on China because it's the right thing to do.
Well, and absolutely to your point, and listeners are going to get sick of this because I've mentioned it several times in previous episodes, but I will go ahead and plug once again our Americans First polling series that we did of President Trump's voters in the 2024 election over the last, now it's been more than 6 months, but we have months and months and half a year of data that show that Trump voters support this president's policies to be tough on China and all our other foreign adversaries because they know how much of a risk it is. So I think you're spot on there. So speaking of the Trump administration, I'd love to hear more about the federalism element and then how states work with the federal government. Are there any areas that you have touched base with them? Any initiatives that the federal government has taken on that you could recreate in Nebraska or in other states? And what's an advantage that you have in a state capital?
Yeah, so it's night and day difference. We've had the opportunity to work with two administrations, the Biden administration, now the Trump administration. Complete night and day difference in terms of the ability to work together with President Trump and his team. What's funny and ironic is, President Trump was really early to the punch when it comes to being anti-China. I mean, we all remember in 2015, 2016, he created not only the America First movement, but he also was ahead of the curve in understanding the public's want and yearning to be tough on China. And that has really carried on between not only his first administration, but also the Biden administration was also looking to be tough on China. The key difference, though, as I mentioned at the start, is they would issue out proclamations and say, states go do something, and provide us no help to do it. Whereas in this administration, Trump 2.0, a tremendous amount of kudos to his cabinet. And, specifically, I mentioned this before, but Secretary Rollins and her team, we're an ag state. So one of the big data points that's provided to us, and this has started since July in the announcement in Washington, D.C. from Secretary Rollins, is the ability to use whether it's farm payments or different payments that are sent through USDA, run it against a couple of different federal programs, and then they're able to share that data with us at the state level, and we can action it through our state laws that we've passed. That cooperation and that federalism in action is just a complete advantage, and frankly, how our founders viewed our system to work. Right? We don't have the capabilities. to access a tremendous amount of data that the federal government does. But at the same token, what we provide value in is we're able to work with them to really action what they're asking to do. So whether it's our Department of Agriculture here in Nebraska or our great Attorney General, who's able to work with the Justice Department at the federal level to keeping certain companies in check. It's just, like I said, night and day difference. Uh, even though Democrats at some point, Democrats also say, "Hey, we want to be tough on China too." The reality is just like the proof is in the pudding in what the current federal government, the Trump administration, is able to help us with in actioning these items.
So, going from cooperation with the federal government, let's talk about how you may have worked with other states, or you think there are areas to work with other states. Have you had any out of state partners, and I don't know, some other capital somewhere that you've taken initiatives on or are interested in doing so?
Well, I mean, thanks to groups like the Vandenberg Coalition, there's other groups, State Armor, that we've worked with. There's a growing coalition of my colleagues all across different state capitals where we are in friendly competition to see like what can be done next. One of the items that's been brought up, frankly, to me from the state of Tennessee that we're trying to mirror here in Nebraska, um, is taking a look at our tax credits that we provide and really defunding Chinese-owned companies. So there's a number of companies that China has acquired, whether it be Smithfield or Syngenta, that they have the face of either a former American-owned company or in Syngenta's instance, a European company, that are still eligible for tax credits in a variety of different states. We've been able to learn from Tennessee, pass legislation last year, and further passing legislation this year. That's going to save Nebraska taxpayers tens of millions of dollars, because at the end of the day, we should not be, as a state, giving preferential tax treatment to the CCP. It just doesn't make sense, right? Why would we tax Nebraskans just to hand it over to Beijing? So at the end of the day, all of my colleagues that are looking to do different types of state actions within the state capital, we're bouncing ideas off each other, through our variety of different groups we work with, or Republicans Governors Association. And frankly, having this is once again an area where federalism is just the beautiful system because we're able to learn in Lincoln, what's happening in Austin, or what's happening in Jefferson City, and it's kind of neat to see all these things pop up, and they all get tweaked to make sure that what works specifically in Tennessee might not be specific to Nebraska, so there might be some different tweaks there, and it's really fun to see, and it's an exciting time right now, frankly, to be in the business of policymaking at the state level.
So, to conclude, can you share something you think that listeners, constituents in Nebraska and elsewhere, and then other state policymakers should know about why you in Nebraska have taken this approach and why they should take this threat of the CCP and the United Front seriously at home?
Yeah, I mean, that is a great question. The reality is there's two opportunities and ways of life, not only for Americans, but frankly the global community. Do we want to continue on a post World War II uh, global community where, frankly, we for the most part have freedom of movement? Um, we are able to express ourselves in the way in which we see fit. We're able to own our own intellectual property and create value out of that intellectual property, not be worried about that being stolen by someone else. That's option A. Or option B is frankly living under a tyrannical regime that doesn't respect personal freedoms and also, is quite literally going through an ethnic cleansing process and project that is just abhorrent and unacceptable. Um, that may seem it may seem like I'm exaggerating, but that frankly is what's in front of us over the next, 25, 50 years. Um, and, something that I hope your listeners or other state policymakers um, take out of this is you don't necessarily have to do pass anti-China legislation like how Nebraska is passing anti-China legislation. Rather, everything matters in the sense of if your state can deregulate so we can become more business friendly and build more power generation. So that way we're able to fuel manufacturing growth or AI growth. That is something that helps in the fight in China, right? If your state is able to um, educate kids to the point of creating a 21st century workforce, whether that's working in AI or working in the trades, that is fighting China, right? Because it is a all the above approach where we have to win at the state level. And the way that we primarily provide winning ball at the state level is making sure our economy is dynamic and our economy is going to be able to match and surpass and beat what's happening in China. So everything helps. Everything helps, whether it's making sure that, and this is, going to be way out of left field, whether it's making sure our kids can read by the age of fourth grade. That way, we're providing that 21st century workforce, to providing a good economic environment, to making sure that your critical infrastructure in your state is protected. All of that matters because it truly is, it's going to be a nation struggle for us to make sure that we continue to be ahead and defeat the CCP.
Yeah, that's an excellent point there at the end. Really, every person in this country has a role to play in their everyday life. I'm really glad that Nebraska, though maybe it's small in population, sure is mighty and is leading the charge against our greatest foreign adversary. And for that, you certainly all should be applauded. And I really appreciate Kenny Zoeller, you taking the time to speak with Vandenberg today.
No, I appreciate it, Thor. And once again, go Big Red. And what go Big Red means is go Nebraska.
Yeah, don't go CCP. Thank you. Thank you for tuning in to China in the Homeland, a production of the Vandenberg Coalition. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, leave a review, and tune in again as we explore the role of states in confronting the China challenge. Also, please follow our account on X @VandenbergCo, visit www.vandenbergcoalition.org, and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, Beyond the Water's Edge, to keep up to date on all our other projects. Until next time, I'm Thor Mortensen, and this has been China in the Homeland.